Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron Hoisington. I am here with Ryan Nelson, founder of Alchemy Wealth Management, a business owner himself, as you guys hopefully tuned in last week and checked out that episode on it. Ryan, how are you? How's the business? How are things?
I'm doing well. Yeah, everything's really good. What about on your end?
Not too bad. I'm just, living the dream here. We're over halfway through the year at this point, I believe, and so we're cruising. 2025 has been a good year so far.
Yeah, time flies.
It really does. It really does, and we'll see how. Hopefully, we'll see. Sometimes I'm always just like. I say sometimes I'm always, that's an oxymoron, but sometimes I'm like, hey, time's going by so fast and it's great. Or other times it's like time's going by so slow and it's great.
Right.
Honestly, just kind of making the best out of your certain situation. So little tidbit there. But anyway, thank you so much, everyone who's joining us this week. We're going to dive into this next topic. We're going to talk about homeownership. Ryan, you intrigued by that topic?
I'm very intrigued.
Excellent. So am I. So, good time to pause here and take a preface this episode with Ryan and I are not trying to give financial advice specifically. We're definitely not qualified to give realtor advice or mortgage broker advice, lender advice, or anything like that. So this is going to be an episode where we kind of talk about our personal experiences and certain things that go into the cost of owning a home, or what actually homeownership means, what it could be, the financial implications of it. So definitely don't take anything we say as gospel with this here. Consult your proper professionals. And with that, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, perfect. It's a fun question. I think that, like you said, it's the biggest purchase that a lot of people make, and there's a lot to it, right? And sort of a lot of financial implications sort of behind the scenes that people don't always necessarily think of on the front end. And so, I'm excited to dive into this one. And let's do just that. Let's just dive right in.
I love it. Let's do it. And so, definitely want to preface, or one other thing, sorry to cut you off here, but just with this, making sure that everybody knows, you own a home, right, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
I also own a home as well, too. So I'm not saying anything that we're going to say here is the path to go down. It's going to be completely up to however anybody wants to do it, but we're just going to kind of paint a picture of that potentially, like you said, the biggest purchase somebody might make in their life. So that's kind of how we came on this, and I think it is a fun topic. So anyway, go ahead. I'm done. Yeah. Go ahead and dive in, my man.
Cool. Let's do it. So let's talk about the upfront costs first.
Sure.
So you're going to have a down payment. Most people are familiar with the down payment, right? So that's typically going to range somewhere between like 3 and 20%. Obviously, there's certain types of loans where you could put even less than 3, and some people will end up putting 50 or even 100% down, in which case they'll just buy the house in cash, right? But again, typically you're looking at putting somewhere between 3 and 20% down. One thing to note is there's something called PMI, private mortgage insurance, and that you will, for most types of loans, you'll have to pay PMI if you've put less than 20% down. So this is basically insurance on the mortgage in case you can't make your payments. So if you only put down 5% on the house, you're going to have to pay PMI in addition to your normal mortgage payments. So that's something to consider as you're figuring out how much to put down on a down payment. If you're planning on putting like 18 or 19% down, heck, you might want to just push that up to 20 to avoid this PMI, right? And your mortgage broker should be able to help you figure out exactly what the PMI is for your house. But the other costs, so there's the upfront cost, we're going to have the down payment. That's a big lump sum that goes down. And then we're also going to have our closing costs. Closing costs are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 or 5% of the home price. And that includes things like the lender's fees, escrow, title insurance, and things like that. So those are, you can kind of think of these as the fees to actually execute the transaction, whereas the down payment actually went to help pay down your mortgage, right? So the down payment was going towards the actual value of the house. These closing costs are sort of more fees associated with the transaction itself. And then in addition to that, you're also going to have to pay like inspections and appraisals. And those are costs that a lot of people don't initially think of on the front end. And depending on where the house is and what you need to get appraised or inspected, that could be over $1,000, right? Usually each one is in the neighborhood of hundreds of dollars. And so if you get a few or multiple inspections, that could add up to over $1,000. And then other than that, another thing that I feel like is very, very commonly overlooked is the actual, like what I'll just refer to as move-in costs.
100%. Oh, man.
So that is like... When you buy a new house, all of a sudden you're like, I need a couch for the living room and I need a TV for the living room and I need a bed for the spare bedroom, right? And so whether it's your first time purchase or you're buying a bigger house or you're moving across country, like either way, you very often will have some piece of furniture or something that you now feel like either you didn't have before that you need to buy new, or the old piece of furniture you had doesn't fit the new house or whatever. And so there's oftentimes a number of furniture expenses, maybe some repairs or just like slight remodeling you want to do. You're like, oh, this is a perfect house, but I don't like the flooring in the bathroom. Okay, there's a cost, right? And so, yeah, especially for first-time home buyers, but I see this even for people who are even moving from house to house. Oftentimes, there's a lot of these what I'll refer to as moving costs. And again, these are super, super common to overlook. So if we think about that in total, you have your down payment, that ranges, let's call it 3 to 20%. Of course, it can go even above that. Then you have your closing costs, that's 2 to 5% of the house value. You have inspections and appraisals, you're talking $500 to $1,000, let's call it, maybe a little more. Then you have your move-in costs, that's going to be your furniture, repairs, deposits, who knows what that will amount to depending on kind of your taste, your style, how big of a house you're buying, right? But so if you think about buying like a $500,000 house, a $500 house, the $500,000 house isn't going to just cost you $500,000. You might need $15,000, $30,000 on top of that, on top of your down payment, which is going towards the $500,000. But you might need another $15,000 or $30,000 on top of the down payment just to for the closing costs, the inspections, the appraisals, the move-in costs, right? So again, I think there are a number of upfront costs that are very commonly overlooked and not always considered.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, man. I remember. So I think you were pretty much the first one of my friends that I know to buy a house. I think that was 2014. Maybe you might have the date year wrong, but
sure,
around that time. And I remember like when you moved into the place, you still live there now, which is funny. But it's
can't afford to move.
Yeah, no way. Too many upfront costs. Many. But I remember you bought a bunch of furniture, and you were just like, and you were like constantly, because we used to hang out there quite a bit, and there was always like for the first month, like more stuff being delivered. And I remember one of our friends asked like, how much have you spent on this? And you're like, I really don't know. Like, it just kind of added up. Like you're just like, because I wanted this bar for the downstairs, and I wanted this, love seat for the little area here. It's so funny. Like to think, and I remember thinking about that and being like, oh, that's interesting. And then when I first bought my first house, my wife and I was like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what's going on here.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm constantly getting things delivered that I'm like, oh, yeah, this from our old place doesn't fit, or, oh, this mattress is not going to work, so we get another. And so those little things that you think you planned for, and then when it's actually in it, you're like, whoops.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah. If you buy like a 4-bedroom house, you're probably not okay with just one of the bedrooms sitting empty.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, you're not just like, I'm just going to close that door. I don't need that room right now. You're probably going to put something like, you feel almost obligated to put either like a desk and a computer or
just
a
bed.
Rug. Yeah. So, it's funny. It definitely can get kind of out of control. Right.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
But cool. So those are kind of a good summary of our upfront costs.
Yes.
Now you have monthly costs, right? So you just buy this property, you now have monthly costs. So you're going to have your mortgage. I think everybody is aware of that one. So that's going to be a combination. Your mortgage is a combination of your principal and your interest. And so obviously the interest is going to be dependent on your rate in the term, 15-year or 30-year, and how much you put for down payment, all that fun stuff. But you have your mortgage payment. Then you also have taxes and insurance. So oftentimes you'll hear this term PITI, P-I-T-I. That's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And so we already talked about principal and interest. Now the taxes and insurance, that's how much you're going to pay in property taxes and home insurance. Property taxes, even once you have your house paid off, you're still going to be paying property taxes. You pay that for the entire time you own the property. So even if you completely pay off your home, you're still going to pay taxes. If you have a mortgage, insurance is typically going to be required as well. I think in theory you could drop your home insurance if you don't have a mortgage. But again, most people, it's their biggest asset they have. It probably doesn't make sense not to have it insured, right? So for most people, even once they pay off their mortgage, their principal and interest, most people will still have taxes and insurance that they're paying on their property for the rest of their life. And really that can add up as well. You know, that might be somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 to $1,000 a month just in taxes and insurance on top of your sort of principal and interest. And again, that would be paying sort of even once your house is completely paid off. I will say taxes could vary very drastically. Like different states throughout the country can have very different property taxes. So that'd be something to think about. And it's sort of proportional to the home value. But in addition to that, there's maintenance and repairs, right? So it's buying the new dishwasher and dryer and hot water heater, right? Redoing the bathroom floor. And so typically a rule of thumb is to budget 1% to 2% of the home value annually in repairs.
Oh, okay.
So again,
that's a good number.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, rough rule of thumb.
Sure.
And then additionally, seems like more and more common these days is HOAs, right? So you have an HOA, some sort of HOA fee that could be monthly, it could be quarterly or something as well. But obviously HOA fees can vary pretty drastically. Some low, in $50, some $500, and certainly I've heard stories of HOAs being a lot higher than even $500, right?
Yeah.
So if we think about kind of all the monthly costs you're committing to your mortgage, your principal and interest, your property taxes and insurance, your maintenance and repair costs, and potentially if you're in the community, HOA fees as well on top of that.
I'm just going to pause there. That seems like a lot.
It definitely can
just
be,
listening to think about it, it's like, okay, and then this, and then this, and then this. So like, it's not just like whether it's good or bad, but it's not just a cookie cutter, like, cool, like it's, here's your mortgage, that's it. Like there's so much other stuff that goes into
100%.
it that is it's always interesting to think about that when you coming from like renting to owning a home, you're like, oh wow, now I am the landlord.
Yeah. Kind of, it's almost like our conversation last week about entrepreneurship, right? It's like, yeah, when you start your own business, you get a lot of the upside, but you're responsible for everything, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing when you buy your own house. You get the upside if the house appreciates, but you're now responsible for everything.
Right.
Right. And it can add up for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, let's talk about some of those like considerations or strategic considerations. So I'd say one of the biggest misconceptions I always see is assuming that homeownership is the best financial move. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's true. I think homeownership is sometimes the best financial move and sometimes it's not. But so renting isn't throwing away money. I hear that all the time. Yeah. Oh, I'm renting, I'm just throwing away money. It's like, no, that's not true. You are getting a roof over your house to sleep in exchange for funds. Like that's not throwing away money. You're getting a basically a service for the funds, right? That you're using. And depending on what your priorities are, like if you value flexibility or something, then gosh, renting could be a phenomenal solution, right? And there's a lot of pros to renting. You're not responsible potentially for the HOA fees. You're not responsible for the maintenance and repair fees. You're not on the hook for, if property taxes go up or insurance rates go up. You're not on the hook for, any of those risks. You weren't responsible for like the inspection and the appraisal costs. You weren't responsible for the closing costs. You weren't responsible for the down payment, right? So there's a lot of benefits to renting. Yeah, you don't get to share in the upside growth of the property.
Sure.
But you also weren't taking any of the risk to do so, right? Mm-hmm. So just something to think about there. The other thing I would say is like, we've all heard it, right? But cash is king. But what I would say is like cash flow is king. And just because your bank says you can afford it doesn't mean you can.
Right.
And I would argue that usually what the bank tells you can afford is probably much higher than you should responsibly be buying. Mm-hmm. I remember, like you said, when I bought my first house, it was, over a decade ago. And I don't think I was making very much money. And they told me I could buy a house that there's no way I could ever afford, right?
Yeah.
But they would have let me buy it if I wanted to. But
sure.
I would have been just tied to that house. Like I wouldn't have been able to afford anything else. And so some other considerations, I would always say plan for the unexpected. So expect, roof leaks and hot water heaters to fail and, the microwave to crash or whatever. So just anticipate those types of unexpected sort of events. And as long as we touched on it earlier, but if you're planning for those maintenance and repair costs, you should be prepared there. And then consider future resale like value. So think like an investor, right? Even if it's your primary residence, consider potential resale value, and consider renting as well. I think just make an honest sort of evaluation of your financial situation and decide what's best for you, whether that's renting or owning. And I don't think it's always owning. I think it's sometimes owning. I think it's sometimes renting. And both can be great financial decisions as long as you're sort of going into both decisions with your eyes open and making informed decisions.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think you a little while back, you hit on an incredibly common phrase that people talk about, like throwing away money with renting. Like, and I rented for my whole life. Like before, like I bought my first house, and I was just like, I never had an issue at all with renting, because I was like, cool, I know that this money is going towards, like you said, keeping a roof over my head. I don't have to worry about if the dishwasher breaks. Right. This is covered in this, or whatever it might be. I don't have to worry about the roof leaking, and me covering that specifically. So I definitely, I feel like there's always, I feel like we go through stages in just life in general of people like, oh my gosh, I've got to buy a house. We all got to buy a house. We got to get this American dream, this thing that's kind of pushed on you. And whether it be the right decision for you, that's completely dependent on what you want to accomplish. Because if you buy a house and when you're, 21, 22, whatever, you're a young person, and you're like, oh, actually, I want to go travel. It's like, well, okay, but you got this. What are you going to do with this asset that you have potentially and you're responsible for? Is it rented out? Is it sell it at that point? And you never can tell like what it's going to do. And so the idea that like, hey, I'm going to buy a house, it's going to be a great financial investment, is not always the case.
Sure.
I would say.
Yeah. Can be, but not always.
Can be, not always.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's good to consider all the factors there for sure.
Cool. So let's put a quick bow on this one as well. So some quick tips, I would say, if you are looking at buying a house, get pre-approved. So you want to go talk to a mortgage broker, get pre-approved, figure out what you can afford, so that when you're looking at houses, you actually know you're not looking at houses that you can't afford.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, I would take it a step past that. I would talk to the bank to see what they will pre-approve you for. But then you need to do your own due diligence, look at your own cash flow and see what you can actually afford. And now you might be more empowered with actually realizing all the additional costs. So the bank might say, hey, you can afford this much. You start thinking about it, and maybe you say, okay, I can afford $2,000. So if you start looking for a house where the mortgage alone is $2,000, that might be setting you up for failure, right? You probably want to say, no, if $2,000 is all I can afford, I need to remember there's going to be maintenance costs in here, right? There's going to be all these other costs. And then you might say, okay, maybe, after the HOA and maintenance and everything else, maybe I can afford a mortgage that's $1,500. Cool. Now, when you're working with a real estate agent, you can actually target houses that are in that sort of ballpark, right?
Sure.
And then I would say also consider building a separate like emergency fund for your house, so to speak. So sometimes people like to sort of, it's easy to conceptualize if you have a different account built out for your house. Then it's easy to see like, okay, this is where my 1% to 2% is flowing to. I know it's there. I know it's available. I can afford the new hot water heater if that so happens, right? So a lot of people find that to be a useful strategy. And then I would also say, obviously, as a wealth manager, retirement planner, I would say take a look at how this impacts your long-term retirement plan. Sometimes buying your house can sort of accelerate your retirement plan, help you get to retirement sooner, depending on your financial situation. Sometimes it can hinder your retirement plan, right? So I would say, view this in terms of all your goals together, not just as an isolated decision. Again, as I primarily focus on retirement, I would like to see people consider their retirement goals. And usually that's not a consideration that they're even thinking about when they buy a house. But I think it's a useful exercise to go through and say, okay, like what can I accomplish from a retirement goal if I do buy this house? How does my now retirement goal change if I don't buy this house and I continue to rent? And then you can start to make an informed decision for you whether renting or buying is the right choice.
Yeah, no, I think that's phenomenal. And I would also let the listeners know that we did an episode I can't even remember which one it was, but on should I pay off my house?
Yeah.
I believe that would be integral to listen to that one as well, in conjunction with this one, to kind of go back and check it out. And so I'm curious to see, like, you could probably find some similarities, because in that one we talk about like, oh, you personally don't, as a financial advisor, don't view the house as an asset that you should use in specific cases. And obviously it depends on the individual and their situation and such too. But it is very important to think about like, cool, I want to buy this house. are you going to be in this house for 30 years? Are you going to, if you're anticipating like, cool, in 30 years when I have this paid off, I'll just sell it and that'll be my retirement or something like that. Like, is that the best move? Probably not to think about, but more power to you, whatever it might be. But definitely, I'm curious after this one airs, I'm going to go back and listen to that one and see kind of the similarities as where it kind of overlaps.
Yeah, good idea.
So I love it when we were able to do that, where we have different topics, but they're kind of like intertwined with each other. It's always kind of fun to see that web that we've weaved.
Absolutely.
But awesome, Ryan. Anything else to say on this topic here before we pause for the personal section?
I think we covered it pretty well. Just reach out. I say if listeners have more questions, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to do another episode addressing those.
Yeah, please do. Please do. All right, we're going to go ahead and pause here. Everybody, hang tight.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody, to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. We are here for the personal section here. And Ryan, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So if you were to have your own talk show, who would be your dream first guest?
So is this not a talk show?
I would. Well, I don't know. I don't know what a definition of we talk, and I don't know if it's a show, but
it depends who you ask, I suppose. So I mean, I think if this is a talk show, I think you're the first guest and the only guest.
Yeah. Good on us.
But no, I think this has come up a few times in my past answers. But like, I'm a big fan of Peter Attia. He's a doctor, like a longevity doctor. So I think that'd be fun. He has similar views as me, like a long-term, like we have a similar background with engineering and finance, and then we have similar views, I think, on the future around like long-term planning. His is more around health related, mine's more around finance related, but a lot of the things are similar in many ways. So I think that'd be a fun guest to have. But another guest that I thought would be kind of cool would be Aaron Rodgers. I'm obviously a huge Green Bay Packers fan. He played a pivotal role in Green Bay Packers winning a Super Bowl for the Packers, and he's like a big. He is who he is, right? He's like unapologetically him. Yeah. Some people love him, some people hate him. Either way, he's a bit polarizing, and he's a good interview. He's a smart guy. He knows what he like. And so I think he'd be a good interview, and he also brings a lot of eyes, right? So if you're a new talk show and you're trying to get people to view, everybody recognizes Aaron Rodgers and knows his name, and it's an easy way to get like sort of some cheap views almost, right? So capture his popularity a little bit. Part of the thing is like a lot of people hate him. Yeah. It'll probably get played on a lot of ESPN people and sportscasters will run with that and play it out. So it's a good way to get probably some attention there. But what about you?
No, that's a great answer. I was you kind of buried the lead. I was going to say Ryan Nelson from Alchemy Wealth. Naturally, that'll get a lot of eyes on it for sure. But no, it's actually funny that you mentioned Aaron Rodgers and his intelligence just overall. So my person would be, his name's Ken Jennings. He's the host of Jeopardy now, and he's like the all-time most winning.
Well, until Aaron Rodgers takes over.
Exactly. Yes. So it's funny because Aaron Rodgers has won Celebrity Jeopardy before, and so it's funny that you kind of intertwine that. But I'm a huge Jeopardy fan, always have been. I mean, if he was still alive, obviously I'd have Alex Trebek. But with Ken, I think Ken Jennings does an awesome job, and I just would love to sit down and see how smart this guy actually is. Like, because on TV, yes, you can get. I mean, he seems to know every single answer on everything, and even like the categories, he has fun facts that he throws out like about. And I was like, how much of this is like, now that you're the host, is planned versus how much do you actually know? Yeah. And so I would really be curious. Just he's I guess one of my idols, so I'd love to sit down and actually talk with him. And I think he'd also get some views too, because people love Jeopardy in general.
Yeah, sure. I'd also be curious. Obviously, I'm sure he's like a genius. I'd be curious like how much or like how good of a problem solver he is versus like remembering facts and like what the difference. I'd just be just curious. Oh yeah, but I'm sure he's clearly. I'm sure. My guess is he's a genius.
I'm definitely going to hit him if he comes on my talk show. I'm going to hit him with the light bulb question. That you told me about 12 years ago, and
we still need to share that with the listeners.
Exactly. Yeah, we will eventually too. We'll puzzle you with that one. Yeah. But anyway, awesome. Well, hopefully one day we get to have that talk show in some capacity and meet these individuals. But for now, Ryan, I think that about wraps us up here. But anything else to play us out?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening, and as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode, and consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.